I think we have quite a few here. Why don't we go ahead and get started with the meeting, and I guess we'll call a roll call. Is that something you want to do, Patika? Who's our secretary? Is it Ed?
That's me.
Okay.
Trying to give my title away already. I've only had it, what, 6 months here, and you're firing me already?
And then do we have a ability to share the screen on the agenda? And who's planning to do that?
I have it up on my screen. Sarah, if you want to give me authority to share, I can do it.
Yep, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. So, document here.
All right, yeah, it appears Kevin Aller just joined. Yeah, we're just getting ready to start, and here's the agenda. And I think it's being shared by Ed. So Ed, if you want to, does anybody have any comments on this agenda, first of all?
No, Jim, as you know, we were going to do both the distribution model update along with the alternative water source update, but as we've said before, they're not ready for the alternative water source update. We'll do that at the next meeting, so it'll just be the distribution model and master plan by AE, along with the improvement program update.
All right, very good. Let's go ahead and get a roll call real quick.
Okay, I can't get
Oh, Jim, I do not have the roll in front of me.
That's all right. Let's just go by entity.
Okay. I'll start with City of Toledo, Ed Moore, Director of Public Utilities. Patika.
I have too many screens up. Patika Bannister, City of Toledo.
All right, Jim Shaw, Lucas County.
Admiral Salem, Fulton County.
Steve Pilcher, Village of White House.
Tom Stalter, Northwestern Water and Sewer.
Alice Godsey, City of Perrysburg.
And it looks like we have Kevin Aller on there, but he's muted. Kevin, you with us?
It looks like he just dropped off.
Okay. All right, well, we'll make a note of that when he returns. It appears that that's it from the contract communities, unless I missed somebody. I'm not seeing any other communities right now. All right, so just to rehash on this agenda, the February 5th meeting minutes were never approved, so I want to see if we can get a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Ziad, second by, do we have a second?
Second Pilcher.
Second by Pilcher. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, those opposed, same sign. Okay, looks like the motion carried there, and so those minutes were approved. Let's see here. It appears Patrick Birch is here. Patrick, are you with us from Maumee?
Oh, let me promote him to panelist. Hold on. Patrick, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
All right, I got it. I look at the video screen here.
And Patrick, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? There he is.
Hi, I'm a city administrator in Maumee. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. And then I believe Kevin Aller was going to try to chime in. If we can hear from him when he comes in, we'll add him to the attendee list for members.
Okay.
So yeah, I do want to, based on that roll call we just took, welcome Patrick Birch as part of this Regional Water Commission. I know Joe Camp served in the role of Maumee in the past. Do you have someone in his place to take a seat on the Regional Water Commission at this time, Patrick?
Sorry about that. I didn't hear what you said. My computer went down.
Okay, no, I was just welcoming you and recognizing that Joe Camp was on the Regional Water Commission in the past, and now that he's retired, I wanted to see if the City of Maumee had made an official appointment
They
to
did.
replace him.
That's me.
Okay, very good. And I did get a message from Kevin Aller. He can hear and he can see, but apparently he can't speak. So he's in attendance by listen only mode, it sounds like. So yeah, if we want to, just to summarize, we did approve the minutes. We have the roll call completed, and we're going to hold off on the alternative water study at this time. Arcadis, or not Arcadis, AECom, is that AECom doing that?
That's correct.
Arcadis is going to give us an update, however, on the water distribution model and master plan update. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed, and you can continue on.
Thanks, Jim. Also, Patrick, can you get a letter from Mayor Carr if you are the new member? You're going to represent Maumee on the Regional Water Commission, and if you could get that to me. I'm Ed Moore, Director of Public Utilities for the City of Toledo, and also Secretary of the Regional Water Commission. That'll help us out, and we'll put that on our files. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll move on through the agenda. Item number 2 is the water distribution model and master plan update by Jim Cooper of AECom, and Andrea Croma from Engineering Services is on as well. Sarah, if you could give Jim Cooper the ability to share his screen so he can walk us through his presentation, I'll end my share.
Okay, perfect. Jim, you can go ahead.
Actually, it's going to be me, Jennifer Webster.
Right,
I'm going to share the screen.
Jennifer presenting, and Andrea, I don't know if you wanted to provide any comments beforehand or if we can jump into the presentation.
I thought I'd just give a brief overview of the project for those who are not familiar with it. So coming up on 2 years ago, the City of Toledo was notified by the Ohio EPA that we would be required to submit by the end of this year, December 31st, 2020, what they call a general plan for the construction of additional finished water storage in our water distribution system. The intent of that finished water storage being to reduce the risk of pressure losses in the water distribution system, as well as increasing our flexibility in operations at the Collins Park Water Treatment Plant. So this project, the one we're going to talk about today, the water distribution system model update and master plan, was needed because we needed to update the city's computer model of our water distribution system to figure out what's the best way, the optimal way to meet the regulatory requirements, and also to best meet current and expected future water distribution needs of all of our customers. So backing up that 2 years, the city wrote an RFP, request for proposals, went out for competitive bids for the project and ultimately hired Arcadis as our consulting engineer for the project. So they performed a large amount of work in a small amount of time, very aggressive schedule for a project of this size. So as of last Friday, they submitted the recommendations for the city's review. And today we have with us several members of their team to discuss the project with this group. So Jim Cooper, Jennifer Webster, and Katie Umberg, you can see on the screen. And Jim Cooper is going to start us off. So back to Jim.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with the city on developing this the project, and certainly some very important outcomes for the city as a result of this. So just a brief agenda. We'll be talking about the overall project approach, just summarizing the tasks associated with this project. We'll very briefly cover some of the results of our demand analysis and projections for the 20-year planning horizon, as well as the computer model update and calibration, and then get into the system performance evaluation results, as well as the storage improvement alternatives. Finally, we'll wrap it up with next steps. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. One of the key aspects of this project is stakeholder engagement throughout it. We did not want to perform this project in a silo and then present results to the city and to all of the project stakeholders at the end. So we've had various workshops with project stakeholders. As you can see here, we had a kickoff with the stakeholder group in June. We presented initial model results and criteria for how we would evaluate those storage alternatives within the city. And we've also recently presented various alternatives that we'll be sharing with you today as well. I recognize many of the stakeholders are also members of the Regional Water Commission. So many of you have seen some of this content. It certainly should not be new. However, this is a public meeting and open to a broader audience. So we're sharing this with the Regional Water Commission through this presentation. The stakeholders that we've had for this project included representatives from the City of Toledo, Ohio EPA as a key stakeholder, Lucas County, Maumee, Northwestern Water and Sewer, Oregon, Perrysburg, South County Water, Sylvania, Fulton County, White House, and of course the consultants. So again, throughout this project, we very much engaged and obtained feedback from all of these various entities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, who's going to go through the next couple sections in our presentation.
Thanks, Jim, and good morning to everyone. Just describing the overall approach and the tasks involved in this project. There were four main efforts: the demand analysis, projections, and the model update and calibration. And those two really provided the tools that were needed to dig into the next two pieces. And so, again, here are these with a brief overview of what were included here. And then, again, the two pieces, the model simulations in order to evaluate conditions, which led into the storage alternatives analysis. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the demand analysis and projections. And this, we looked at three different types of usage when we're going to look at projections moving from now through 2040. And the first was the City of Toledo and Lucas County customers. We looked at them in more detail because we had the billing data, and those customers are also going to be directly included. They are directly included in the model. So we looked at current usage per customer, and that included residential customers as well as business customers. We looked at expected future usage per capita and per employee, and that was taking into account national, regional, and local trends in water usage, which in general are observing decreases in usage. For example, water saving appliances such as washing machines and dishwashers and shower heads are resulting in decreased usage in households. We also considered regional planning data, including from TMACOG, Toledo Metropolitan Area Council of Governments, and brought all that information together to get projected usage for 2025, 2030, and 2040, so looking 20 years in the future. We then looked at usage by the contract communities, so we didn't have as much detailed analysis since those won't be directly modeled, but we worked with them to look at current usage and expected changes. We also looked at non-revenue water. So Toledo, like every utility, does not bill for all of the water that's produced, and then that water can be lost in a variety of ways, including through firefighting and leaks and billing errors. So we looked at how that might change into the future to get these projections that are shown in this figure. So the bottom 4 layers of the figure to the left shows detailed projections for the customer types in City of Toledo and Lucas County, the residential and the business usage. At the top in green shows non-revenue water projections, and all of those types are expected to decrease over the next 20 years. That will be offset, though, by expected increases in usage from the contract communities. There'll actually be a contract community added in Oregon in the next several years that will be increasing the system demand, and several communities are expecting growth, including significant industrial growth that will increase their usage. So as you can see from the numbers on the top of the bars, the overall system usage over the next 20 years is expected to have very small change. It'll just be a different distribution of usage. That chart just shows the average daily usage. The table to the right, which I won't go through in detail, just shows how we then translated that to look at expected maximum day usage as well as peak hour usage. So that projection information was used in the model update and calibration. So instead of using the previous model and just tweaking it, we actually rebuilt the model based on the latest GIS, and that ensured that we had the most up-to-date and accurate information. We also used billing data to do very specific and accurate allocation of demands, and we updated facility information to make sure that we were matching the configuration of those facilities and how they actually operate. For the contract communities, their pipes and facilities were not included directly in the model, but instead we used point demands and considered their usage, as well as using SCADA data to look at how that usage is distributed. After the model was developed, we moved to model calibration, which I'll describe quickly. The goal of calibration was to have the model results be within 7% of the observed value. All of the SCADA data that was available was either used to set up the model or used to calibrate and check that. And we did 2 types of scenarios. We used extended period simulations and looked at both an average day and a max day. And so the 2 figures at the bottom show the match between the observed the SCADA value, those are shown in the blue lines, and the orange, which is the output of our model for both the average day and max day, and these were just different portions of the system. Most of them match very closely in terms of actual values, as well as spikes and drops and changes in the data. There were some difference, and actually the bottom right is an example of an area of the system that we had to dig into a bit more to get a better match. But at the time that these figures were developed, that one had some issues. I'm going to now turn it over to Jennifer to talk about the performance evaluation.
Morning, everyone. is there any questions or comments before I get started into this section of the presentation? Okay, we will keep moving along then. So after the model was developed and calibrated, we wanted to do just kind of a system evaluation. We wanted to look at, current conditions, where there are deficiencies in your system, where are there areas where there was potential need for improvements. And so in order to do that, we had to start out by discussing a level of service criteria and what were the goals of what you're trying to achieve in your system in terms of pressures, pipe velocities, head loss gradient. We actually got into water age and did some water quality modeling as well, and fire flow. So what you see here in the graph in the gray are just kind of industry guidelines, and then on the right are the selected level of service criteria that were used for our particular project. For pressures in general, we were looking at trying to maintain normal working pressures between 45 and 75 psi, trying to get a minimum of 40 psi throughout the system. Velocities, pipe velocities, the target was less than 5 feet per second. A lot of these kind of go along with the industry standards for the various criteria. Fire flow was a little bit different. We were trying to look at specific locations that had already been identified by the insurance service office, in which they had specifically made recommendations for locations for a required fire flow rate. In terms of the actual evaluations that we did in the system, all the evaluations were run under an extended period simulation, which represented a 24-hour period of time. This takes into account the diurnal water usage throughout the day, and in which it brings in various times of the day when you have peak hour demands and you have low water usage demands as well. And so what we looked at in our model results was primarily looking at minimum or maximum values, for example, minimum pressures during peak hour, or maximum pipe velocity during peak hour. So they all ended up corresponding to kind of the peak hour demand condition. We looked at the existing system under the 2018 demands, as well as the 2040 projected demands. As Katie showed in the graph earlier, we don't really anticipate a huge overall change in demands throughout the planning horizon. So we felt comfortable with just kind of looking at the beginning and the end time periods to looking at, anticipated changes in terms of deficiencies, where those deficiencies may be. And then, as was also mentioned earlier, the storage analysis alternative for meeting the regulatory requirements was a big part of this project. So we were looking at the impacts of the change in demands in the system, where those deficiencies were, as well as trying to bring in additional improvements for adding storage to your system. And the table on the right just kind of goes over all the different evaluations that were performed and under which scenario they were performed. This is just an example graph of some of the model results that were obtained. We did color coding of all the different criteria that were shown in the previous slides. This was an example on the left of under the max day what the minimum pressures were, and then on the right was an example of what the fire flow results would look like. And I believe these were under existing system demands. This was the initial. Again, these were just kind of examples to show you how we were able to evaluate the locations of these deficiencies. And then next slide here, this just shows an example of the high pipe velocity evaluation, locations where we saw greater than 5 feet per second. And then on the right, this was a separate criticality analysis where we were looking at the water mains that if there was a specific water main that was taken out of service, either for maintenance repair or under a leakage condition, where would be the areas that would be most vulnerable to not being able to provide adequate pressure, as well as just being able to provide supply to customers. Moving on to the storage improvements alternative. Again, this was a separate analysis that was done. This is just kind of a flow chart of how this alternatives evaluation progressed. We started out by developing various criteria for weighting 4 different alternatives for adding storage to the system. We developed the alternatives. We presented that to the city, received some initial feedback, refined those alternatives, presented that to the stakeholders, which Jim had mentioned earlier as in one of our meetings that we had with the stakeholders, finalized those alternatives, and then we incorporated those into kind of our overall recommendations. So this just shows you all of the criteria that was brought into the alternatives evaluation. They're ranked from highest to lowest weighting. So each criteria was given a separate weighting factor. So the hydraulics level of service goals were the highest weighted factor. And then if you go on down the list, it goes from high to low. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but as you can see, a lot of different criteria were brought into this to try to be able to look at the various alternatives and determine which overall would have the best impact on the system. So I'm going to just go into the 4 alternatives that were that were selected to evaluate. This first alternative, this is alternative number 1. This consists of adding 4 new 2 MGD, million-gallon elevated tanks to the system. These were kind of scattered throughout. There was more elevated storage on the west side of the system, which has the higher elevations, and it was in need of additional pressure in those areas. So we have one kind of in the northwest, one on the very west side of the system, one in the south, and then one close to the plant as well. And there's a little bit more detail kind of describing that alternative 1 again. The top is a description, those 4 elevated tanks, 2 MGD each, ground elevations between 120 and 160 feet. And the locations for those elevated tanks were selected to try to maintain pressure during a brief high service pump station outage. And so that was kind of what we were looking at, is trying to maintain those pressures throughout the system. This alternative would not result in any changes to the current pressure zones. It did show that there would be a challenge with just turning over the tanks because the pumps currently that pump from the high service pump station at the plant are trying to maintain a certain pressure, and so you don't get the turnover that you need necessarily within the tanks unless you change your operations. And so this also would result in slightly increase of water age. Some of the benefits of this alternative was that this would have the lowest time to implement and the lowest impact on operations and maintenance. And so the table on the right, this just kind of shows our overall scoring for each one of those criterias as it relates to alternative 1. Alternative 2 is very similar to the alternative 1. It has the same 4 2 million gallon tanks added to the system. The only difference with this alternative is that there's a second independent high service pump station at the Collins Park water treatment plant. And this was specifically added to this alternative to try to address the issues with power outages at the plant and kind of the lowering of pressures that have been seen throughout the system to try to provide a secondary supply pump station to the system. So again, the summary table just kind of gives the description at the top in terms of the technical impact. This one would be the highest capital cost alternative, just with having to construct an entirely new pump station to supply the entire system. And overall system benefit was not very high for this, for the actual cost of this. And this addressed the risk associated with having facilities at a single site. So again, the criteria scoring for this alternative is shown on the right here. And I'll get to a table at the very end that shows the total score for each one of these alternatives. Alternative 3, big difference between this alternative and the previous alternatives is that we're adding a pressure zone boundary. Under this alternative, it's what we call a soft boundary, which means that there are certain locations where there will be closed pipes to try to maintain higher pressures on the west side of the system, but there will also be a lot of opened pipes, primarily smaller diameter pipes, to allow water to kind of flow back and forth between the two boundary zones. This also included additional tanks. We have one tank in the south again, one a little bit further north in the northwest area of the system, and then we actually have two elevated storage tanks in the north now, and we do not have a tank near the plant under this alternative. Again, the overall summary for this alternative is presented in this slide. Under this alternative, one of the things to mention is that the Quarry Road and the Flanders boosted pressure zones would remain as is. There would be no anticipated changes to those particular areas. This would just be mainly adding a higher pressure area to the west side of the system in addition to those two boosted pressure zones. Under this alternative, Heather Downs Pump Station would also remain as is. The pumps would just be basically operating at a different point on their curve. And then for the final alternative, this is where we have the pressure zone boundary in place, but it's a hard boundary, which means that we're closing off, we're maintaining pressures at a different hydraulic grade line to the west of that boundary than at the east. That means that the plant can be pumping at basically the same head or maybe even a lower head that it is currently to just maintain pressures kind of east of that boundary. And then we have some upgrades that would be needed at the Heather Downs Pump Station to increase the hydraulic grade to the left of that boundary to the west. And we have the addition of a new pump station as well on the north side of the system. And the tanks very similar to alternative 3. So this again is just kind of that overall summary slide. Under this alternative, Quarry Road and Flanders boosted pump stations would be removed. So that would mean we would open up all the pressure zone boundaries in the northwest side of the system. And those two pump stations would be able to be decommissioned, and then all of your pumping would be located either at Heather Downs or the new proposed west pump station. Just to give you an example of kind of what the model results looked like graphically, these were very helpful in just kind of comparing all the alternatives. And this is an example of what was minimum pressures under a max day condition. So this was the original kind of baseline existing pressures in the top left corner. And then as you go across alternative 1 was kind of showing what the pressures would be under that alternative. Alternative 2, there was a baseline existing system 2040 demand analysis that was done without any changes to the system. And you can compare those to 3 and 4. And as you can see, kind of the minimum pressures, they decrease as you move to the northwest of the system. And alternative 3 and 4, we don't see any of the yellow, so we get out of that 20 to 30 range, and everything is at least above a 30 psi, and slightly better pressures under that alternative 3 and 4 scenario. This is an example of the model results under that power outage scenario. As you can see, under existing demands on the very left, without any additional storage, you are not able to maintain pressures above 20 psi for an extended period power outage. I should say brief power outage, but this is more than just a couple minutes. This is for a longer period of time. And then even on the bottom left, without, again, any storage improvements, what you can see is that you would not be able to maintain pressures. And so alternatives 1 through 4 show what it would look like if you do implement those storage improvements. Example of the water age. So water age was another thing that was taken into consideration, because obviously when you add storage to your system, you're going to be holding water in the system, and that's going to increase the water age. So we wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to be a significant impact. And if there was one alternative that may be better than another in terms of water age, we wanted to do the comparison between the alternatives. So we did come up with a couple different sub alternatives to alternative 4. But this, again, just kind of shows you everything still stays, primarily less than 5 days. A couple locations where you see the red dots, those are dead end water mains, which in every scenario, they're going to have the highest water age without any demand on those nodes. And this is the matrix that kind of brings all those storage alternatives together. We have listed by row each one of the alternatives. Alternatives 1, again, with each one of those evaluation criteria scoring. Alternative 2, 3, and 4. The final score, the weighted score, is shown on the very right-hand side, the right column, and the scores came out very, very close to each other. In particular, the score for alternative 1 and 4 were very similar. We did try doing some refinements. We had several meetings with the city to look at adjustments to these criteria weightings, and did not find that there was a significant impact on the highest scoring alternative. And the final selected alternative was alternative 4, was actually creating that kind of the west side boosted pressure zone for the system. And we also discussed the ability to be able to do phased improvements, and that all of the infrastructure needed to put that alternative 4 into place would not necessarily be needed all at once, and that it could be phased in over time. And so, so at this point, the recommendations have been brought together. We've looked at evaluating just system performance overall in terms of what will be needed in order to meet those 2040 demands. We've put together a list of recommendations, and we've kind of drafted those out in a report format. We've included those storage improvement recommendations as well, that alternative 4. As well as there was a few other things that were brought in for system management that were discussed throughout the project that we wanted to make sure were included in the report as well. So that report has been submitted to the city. It's still under review currently at this time. And we are also continuing to work on some additional scope items that have not been complete yet, related to some more water quality evaluations. We're looking at a transient evaluation. We're doing a unidirectional flushing pilot program, and we're also still working on a Lucas County model. And so at this point where we are is, again, we've submitted those recommendations to the city. We still need to get some comments back in order to finalize our draft report. We plan to present the final recommendations to the stakeholder group. After that, everything will be submitted in draft format to Ohio EPA for their comments. And then it'll be finalized, presented again to this Regional Water Commission. And then the deadline for submittal of the general plan to Ohio EPA is December 31st of this year. So that kind of summarizes kind of the overall project and where we're at this point. Are there any questions?
Yeah, are there details related to how much efforts can be made to estimate cost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're developing planning level costs at this point. They will be included in the draft report. We've also kind of presented at this point a recommendation for phasing of improvements, but we still need to talk that out with the city and determine, what makes sense to them in terms of those phased improvements.
Thank you.
Has there been, with your study, are you raising pressures in any of those areas? And has there been consideration on the impacts of the current distribution system with any changes in pressure?
Yeah, I can answer that, Steve. Certainly we are raising pressure because certain portions of the system do not meet the minimum pressures for the level of service target for the city. Those pressures that we're raising are nothing that I would be concerned with for the infrastructure, right? We're not talking about, going to 100 PSI or anything like that. We're talking about going from 20 and 30 PSI to 30 and 40 PSI, for example. So that is a key consideration on this. One of the other aspects that we'll look at, and we have looked at, is in this boosted pressure zone, certainly we'll be increasing pressure. Right now, the graphs that you have seen are the minimum pressure during an annual peak hour condition, right? So pretty high demands. And we'll be recommending variable frequency drives, for example, on the boosted pump station so that we don't have excessively high pressures during average demands.
I have a question about the water age. This is for Arcadis. Looking at alternate 1 and 2 versus the other ones, it looks like we're alternate 3 and 4, they're adding more days, probably up to 3 days on the water age, more specifically the southwest corner of the distribution system. So I don't know if that's going to have a negative impact on us in Fulton County. The water, once it comes to us, it's going to be obviously at 3 more days older, up to 3 more days older. I don't know if that's something that's being considered as part of your evaluation and recommendations for the satellite communities.
Yes, when we talked about next steps, we're currently working on a water quality model that'll simulate free chlorine residuals and disinfection byproducts. So two pieces to the response. One is water age is increasing. In general, it's not increasing too much. Remember, our level of service goal, which aligns with industry practices, is to keep water age within 5 to 7 days. The average water age during existing system conditions right now within the city is 1.1 days. And we're increasing that average to just under 2 days. So certainly when you have the same demands, but you increase the volume, you're going to increase water age. As a result of that, with that water quality model, we'll be looking at what we can do to maintain water quality, which is really what we are all most concerned about.
Compared to other utilities, though, the water age is extremely low for the Toledo system.
I don't know if everybody can visually see it, but there is a Q&A section where there's a comment by Eric Anesco, photojournalist with Channel 11. He's asking the question, would anyone be willing to answer a few of his questions for the news today after the meeting? And I'm not sure if he has the ability to ask the question on here for those that maybe would answer, or if that's something that is related to, specific to the study that was commissioned by the city of Toledo. Is there someone he can contact? Can everybody see that question that's been asked?
Yeah. Jim, I would say, yeah, if he can ask his question up here, that'd be fine. If not, I'm going to defer him. I'm going to refer him to Andrea Croma for the city of Toledo to take the question. Andrea, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. We'll see if that comes up through a chat or other way. Anybody else have any questions? Any more questions?
Great. Hey, Jim, this is Jim Cooper. I guess I would just like to close with, throughout this alternative and throughout the project, right, we've talked about coordinating with the various stakeholders in the various cities and the contract communities. That will be continuing as a part of the next steps. Certainly we'll be having another meeting coming up in August, as you saw on the at the beginning of the presentation. So if any of the contract communities have any additional questions, certainly prepare those, and we'll be discussing the final results at that meeting coming up in the future.
Very good, thank you. And I did see a reply, and the request was to have Andrea contact Eric at Channel 11.
Okay.
As far as other items on the agenda, we do have, we can open up to any other updates from the contract communities. If we want to start with the city of Toledo.
I think you skipped over number 3 there, Jim.
Oh, Water Capital Improvements Program update. Okay, I thought you were holding off on that one. Go ahead. Go ahead and start with that, if you will, Ed.
Okay, well, I'll just defer to Warren, and Warren's going to update us on the water. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest this be held off because the materials were sent out so late. I know an earlier version of capital improvement plan was sent out 2 months ago, but there was a new update this morning. So unless there's something urgent, I suggest that this meeting be adjourned until there's time to review the material that was sent out.
Are you making a motion to adjourn?
I would first like to hear if there's anything urgent that needs to be dealt with today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also ask to give us some more time to review the information. It just came in this morning. We didn't even have a time to review. I would like to recommend that either discuss it for upcoming and near future meeting, or for us to give us some time to review and ask question or digest the information. Unless, like Alice said, it says anything urgent, then definitely we're open for discussion.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that at all. From our perspective here at the city of Toledo, I say we table the number 3 and had a contract community discussion. And then if you guys review the information, you have questions you want answered, immediately send me an email or Warren an email, and we'll reply to you. But we can definitely add it to the next agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm good with that. If there's any highlighted pressing issues that Warren may want to bring up in the contract community status report, that's fine. But yeah, that's the other thing that was sent out too, was the CIP monthly recap, which is really just an update along with the spreadsheet that I know Warren's intimately familiar with. So I think that's a fair request.
It is.
But as far as the contract community status reports, I have no problem moving on to that, if everybody's okay with that. We also did receive a follow-up question from Sean Haggerty, it appears, from Channel 13. So his question, it says, with the work being done so far, and actually he just deleted it, or somebody replied to it.
Oh, it's, I just put answered live. So if
There it
you
is.
go to that tab, you should be able to see it.
Gotcha.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
With the work being done so far, do you see adding any new communities in the future? And I'm assuming that's contract communities and stuff like that. So I guess the answer to that question is I don't think there's any intention right now to really, the Regional Water Commission, have a conversation about that quite yet. But I'll let the City of Toledo address that offline if they wish. The other thing from a standpoint of these Zoom meetings, we're probably going to in the future have to establish some protocol, standard operating procedures, if you may, getting the information out, like Alice alluded to, recognizing where it was published, for advance notice for publishing public meetings, and making sure people are aware. And then each contract community, I can see at minimum should have that published as well, to be able to publish it at their communities. So those are things we have to work through. And as you can all understand, with this new COVID world that we're living in, a lot of things have changed, and there's some last minute things that we tried to accomplish here, specifically for this meeting. But I think we'll have time to do it right for the next meeting, if it's going to be a Zoom meeting, and maybe establish parameters on accepting questions, and whether it's in the chat and monitored by one person. Maybe our secretary had more. But from the standpoint of handling these the most efficient way, I know a lot of you have your own meetings that you're dealing with. So anyhow, I just want to throw that out there while you happen to think of it, and notice that there's another question that came about.
Hey,
but Ed, you want to start with the city of Toledo?
Yeah, but can I make one request here? I think if we're gonna table item number 3, we should make a motion and have someone second it, just to make it official.
Okay.
And I don't know if you see in the chat, there's a question about the document being made public.
Sure, we can take care of that.
Do we have a motion to table item 3?
I move to table item 3.
Okay, Alice moves. Any second?
I'll second.
Second by Ed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ed, for keeping us on track with that. And then if you want to go with your contract community status report.
Sure. Right now, more than anything, I just want to update everyone on what we're doing here with Toledo Lucas County Retail Rate, as far as working with a newly formed Water Affordability and Consumer Protection Task Force that City Council formed after we passed the retail rate and the wholesale rate as well. We put together a group of concerned citizens and community members that are working with us to, number one, develop a rate study for both the water and the sewer system. Jim, we probably need to get you more involved with that also, because it does affect the retail rate and Lucas County customers. So we're working hard on that now. Warren helped us develop an RFP for the rate study. That should be going out, advertised this weekend. We put some work in to try to finalize. We have a final document now. We'll get that on the street Saturday. That's a lot of what's going on right now. The second other major item we have going on here in Toledo, other than the 2 studies with the alternative water source and the water distribution model, we're finalizing our AMR project. We have officially dropped the AMR portion of it. This will be a full AMI project. We're trying to finalize language in the contract now with Johnson Controls. We hope to have that pass through council here in the next month or so, and hopefully we get where we need to be. We'll start construction on the infrastructure in September, sometime in September. So we're pushing ahead. This will be a full AMI system. As I said, it will be all of our residential and commercial meters. What we found in the study we've done in the large meter evaluation is that our large meters are in very bad shape. So most of those meters will be replaced. If they don't need to be fully replaced, we'll repair them. But as you know, through our uniform contract, Toledo did assume ownership of those large meters. So we will get that work done. and we'll have a really accurate billing system after this project is done. Once the construction is done, it's going to take approximately anywhere from 30 to 36 months to build out the system and have it up and fully functional. So those are the major things we have going on here in the utility now. Any questions about either of those items? Okay. Well, Warren, is there anything you that's pressing you want to add about water CIP real quick? You're muted.
I got unmute. Here we go. I would just mention that take a look at the H2O website, and on there are the graphics for the program of what's been completed or what is being completed, as well as a 2-page summary, the financial summary that's updated monthly. So keep that in mind as well. And that's about it.
Okay. That's it for the city of Toledo.
Let's go with White House, please.
Currently, White House is surviving the COVID shutdowns and reopenings. Don't really have anything to report. Our TTHM testing has been very good with the introducing the aeration methods with the Solar Bee Medora Corporation improvements we did a couple years ago. So that seems to be taking care of the problems that we were running into, and looking forward to see what comes in the future with the new improvements at the plant. Just a reminder on, I think we're going to be seeing some new lead testing requirements, so everybody be ready for that.
Thanks, Steve. And speaking of the improvements at the plant and the impact of ozone that might play on the TTHM, any updates on the ozone and when that's going to come on, and its impact on chlorine?
And Ed or Patika, or Ed, Patika, or myself, that's one of the things I was going to touch on as part of my CIP update. So
Yeah, that was part of the update. I don't know.
Do you want me to touch on that, Patika? Or
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely impacted the work on the ozone project. The project's about 86% complete right now, but it's not going to be available for the 2020 HAB season. That was announced by the mayor's office in a release that came out in April. So there's just been huge impacts with respect to reduced labor work hours, production, due to the distancing mandates, reduction in workforce, number of sick time call-offs that occurred, and there's just new practices for workplace practices that have slowed down production as well. So it looks like really that we're saying this, the spring of early spring of 2021 is when the ozone facilities will be fully functional. We'll be starting into getting into commissioning and start up fairly soon, but that's at least an 8-week process. And then you get into the instrumentation control systems and such. There's a changing water quality that's going to be taking place over the winter. So we're saying that it looks like 2021 is when we'll have the system fully shaken out and operating under any water condition. And of course, they'll be ready for the next season, HAB in 2021.
Warren, I have a comment on the ozone treatment and more specifically the lead and copper additional monitoring that we're supposed to do with the satellite community. The EPA has sent out notices to all the satellite community that they are required to restart lead and copper monitoring with with the full sites, and then reduce monitoring accordingly. would it be appropriate to update the EPA so in turn they could update the monitoring schedule so we would not start that additional lead and copper monitoring until we're 100% substantially completed on that ozone treatment? Because if we start monitoring the first 6 months, it may not truly represent the change in water quality.
Right, and we are in dialogue with the Ohio EPA. They have been notified, so yes, that's the next logical conversation to have with them. Yes.
Thank you. And then Fulton County, since you're on the floor there, Ziad.
Sure. Yes, Fulton County, we did not have much operational issues because of the COVID-19. All the water and the rest of the utilities continue to operate 100%. We did not. We followed the governor's office as no shut-off orders, and as per schedule. The county commissioners, however, did offer a waiver of late fees if requested. So on the financial side, we have not seen any negative impact whatsoever for the COVID-19 situation. However, we are resuming the shutoffs because the governor's office has rescinded or terminated the orders of shutoffs as of July 10th. So that would kind of corresponds with our next billing cycle, which is will happen around the same time. As far as water production or consumption by our big water users, North Star, they are still under completion of the improvement or expansion of the facility. So we should see an increase in water usage by their facility by mid-2021. Expected to, the demand will go up from the current rate, which is about 1.75 million gallon a day, to approximately 2.3 million gallon a day. And that's pretty much it on the Fulton County update.
Thank you. And then Perrysburg, please.
Right button. Okay, hit the right button. Good morning, all. Following up on Ziad, we are going to resume shutoffs as of July 20th. We have our office is still closed to the public. We have no date for opening up to the public. We're working through limited use of the drive-through and our night box. And we are working with new gen strategies on our 4-year water and sewer rate study. That's all I've got.
Thank you. And then Northwest Water and Sewer District, Tom.
Thanks, Jim. Couple things. Interestingly enough, we just got data on our consumption from January to June compared to from 19 compared to 20. Our consumption in our Toledo served area is up about 3.5 million cubic feet. And our revenue's up quite a bit too, about $122,000. So we've actually seen revenues increasing throughout most of our system. We did have a small rate increase last year, but our usage is up as well. The projects that we've got going on that will be of concern, we're still working forward on that emergency interconnection between Perrysburg and Bowling Green and us, and that's something we're going to need to bring to the commission and the Toledo staff and get our legal teams to work out an agreement on that. We've identified the site. We're trying to negotiate for purchasing the property right now. We've also are under design, preparing to bid a new 1.5 million gallon elevated tank to serve our 100 or Toledo system. That will be located towards the southern southeastern extremity of our system. It will serve as another tank in addition to our Oregon Road tank for the Toledo pressure system, or actually our low pressure system. But it'll also be a nice reservoir for our high pressure system out by the Home Depot facility and the new NSG facility out there. First Solar has started ramping up, and they're starting to use, I think they just hit 1 million cubic feet a month in usage. That's the highest we've seen out of them. And that system that project is complete, and they're getting ready for production. NSG, which is related to them as well, they're going to be providing glass for First Solar. As I mentioned, out near the Home Depot site is about 75-80% complete, and they're not going to be as big a water user, but we are getting a lot of interest still in that site for potential use. And we've got a little bit of work going on our East Broadway booster pump station. That should be completed here in the next 30 days. And we're in shape. That's all I have.
Thank you. And before we get on the City of Maumee, I'm not sure what all Patrick has to update us on, but I did want to note that Kevin Aller did send me a note here that their offices are open to the public with separation, and they don't have any significant water projects at this time. But yeah, Patrick, do you want to provide an update of Maumee? And I did notice you had a chat function there, a question about Fallen Timbers area.
Yes.
That is within the Lucas County Water Service area, so we can discuss that.
Okay.
Offline, if you wish.
Yeah. And I'll send I see your email here, Jim. I'll send you a chat on what that's going on with that. Right now, the city of Maumee has signed contracts with JDI to design roughly 13 water main loops in our system and replacement of shallow lines, stuff that's probably been neglected for a while. We also, we're also trying to extend some roadway, water and sewer and Fallen Timbers. We got a couple of developments that have signed on the dotted lines. We got to extend loop for that, another subdivision on Black Road, but it's across the Norfolk Southern tracks from the Fallen Timbers Mall. We also have city building is open to appointment only. I'm still kind of struggling with trying to figure out where this COVID thing is going. We're also looking at some other significant telemetry projects with the water system as well and our SCADA system. So with that, I don't have anything else. I'm new, obviously, been doing this for 33 years, and I haven't seen Warren in a long time. Hello, Warren. It's been a long time.
Hello, Patrick. Good to see you.
Since I was in Dundee 10 years ago. So, but this is home for me. I graduated from Anthony Wayne, so coming back to Ohio is kind of neat after 32 years career in Michigan. So, hi to all of you.
Likewise.
Thanks, Patrick. And then as far as Lucas County, I don't know if there's any, I don't think there's anybody else on for updates, but for Lucas County, we're part of the master plan, water master plan that's being done with the city of Toledo. We are all back to full staff as of July 13th. Prior to that, we were operating on a minimum 50% schedule, depending on the function. But we are fully staffed, and we're calling it a new kind of open in Lucas County. So if you're in your area like I am right now, you don't need face coverings, but we have all the restrictions applicable for a business. We do allow one person in at a time at our front area, and we're separated by a high-tech shower curtain. So it works out well. We believe it or not, in our office, we only have 2 people that are within 6 feet of each other, and their office is separated by that shower curtain as well. Anyhow, as far as other things that are going on with regard to OPWC, if you didn't get a notice, you're going to get a notice. They did release the SCIP funding. The governor signed that. So anybody that had plans for July 1st OPWC agreement, I know City of Toledo, Lucas County for sure did, and any other community that did. They did release those, and a lot of what we're focused on as an older, becoming older system is water main replacement. So, just like mentioned in the city of Maumee, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve and get some of these projects funded through OPWC. And also in coordination with the county engineer, replacing water mains at the same time they're doing road improvements in the various townships. So that's pretty much what we have in Lucas County. Any other items to be brought before the commission? I do want to, I think I mentioned at the last meeting in February, but we talked about methods or procedures for posting our activities and documents. And I know we're looking to hold something on Toledo's site. And I know Toledo, even with their capital improvement, the H2O website and the updates that are available anytime we want to click on them. But I think we had talked about having a direct link on the city's website that each one of the contract communities could link to, that would have these associated documents tied to them in meeting minutes and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure where you're at on that, Ed, but just if you can update the group. But you're muted.
Sorry about that. We're still working on that. Obviously, right after the last meeting, our worlds went upside down. So I have Sarah on the call with me, and I'll work with her and Ignacio to get something on the city's website. Warren, what's your thought about the H2O site? Having all of the Regional Water Commission information being stored on the H2O site. And then having everyone link to that. That was kind of my thought on it. Just wanted to see how you guys feel about that plan.
Well, it would certainly work for the H2O site. It's just a matter of what the commission members in the city, how they want to manage the information and how the city wants to administer the information. So
okay,
either vehicle would work, the H2O site or having a link to the city's site directly.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good fit because not only are you going to go there to get anything on the Regional Water Commission, but you'll have all of the capital improvement plan information at your fingertips as well. I think it'll be a real good fit there.
I agree with you, Ed. I agree with you 100%.
All right. So I'll get the ball rolling on that with Ignacio and our communications. We'll try to have that set up by the next meeting. And as I get better information, I'll definitely email everyone to keep you updated.
The other thing that happens periodically, and I know each one of us deal with this on varying levels, but qualification-based selection process that we sometimes go through, and it's always good to have other technical experts involved, bounce things off the various communities. But I know that I have assisted the city of Toledo in the past with some of their evaluation of various firms and things like that. And I just wanted to kind of mention that I know the city of Toledo has looked for people to assist from the Regional Water Commission and anybody else that may have projects going on, and we do as well, to reach out to each other. And if anybody's interested in that, be sure to let one of the other members know or send it out to the group. I think it's helpful for everybody. All right. I think, is there any other issues to bring before? I think all of our Q&As were at least responded to or addressed or going to handle offline. Next thing would be the next meeting. And I think it's probably fair to say that we should schedule that when we know that the alternative water supply evaluation is prepared to have a conversation. If everybody's okay with that, we'll just post that to be determined.
Good. I'll make a note of it.
All right. If nothing else, your motion to adjourn could be leaving the Zoom.
There you go. I make a motion.
Ed made a motion, second.
Second, Pilcher.
Second by Pilcher. All those in favor say aye or click off.
Aye.
Yeah.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Appreciate it.